the participants number is growing, so I might just give it a little bit longer for people to just connect. Okay, given the fact that we're on a bit of a time constraint, I think I'll kick off. Welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name's Liam Pietzka. I'm the director of Brightbox Consulting. And for those of you who don't know, Brightbox are a talent business specifically within the digital and technology recruitment industry. We specialize in digital marketing, products, human-centered design, and then digital technology as well. And we're really pleased to host our first webinar today, first of many, I hope, and specifically around products. I feel like I should probably change the title of this talk a little bit because I feel like we're getting a bit of pivot fatigue at the moment. So I might change it to adapting product and product teams, adapting products and product teams through a crisis. And I'm really pleased to have 4 product professionals join us today and give it their time to have a conversation about some of the challenges and some of the successes that they've been having within their organizations, within the product space, with their product teams as well. And I'll just go around and just do a quick introduction. And if you just want to kind of wave your hands, just so people know who I'm referring to. First of all, really pleased that Adrienne Tan has joined us today. She is the CEO and co-founder of digital product management company Brainmates. A lot of people in the product industry will know Adrienne Tan. And moving on to Tom Dyson, the head of products for Jobadder. Jobadder are a recruitment software organization. I'm a customer of Jobadder. Thank you, Tom, for joining us today. Moving on then to Christy McCarthy, who is the head of products for a digital non-profit organization specific to the mental health industry, ReachOut Australia. Thanks for joining us today, Christy. And then last but definitely not least, we have Scott Savage, who is the Chief Product and Technology Officer for health tech organization, two-sided marketplace, Mabel. So thank you guys all for joining us today in this discussion. So I guess what I'll do is launch into the first question, and it's quite a big question, so I'm going to throw it to kind of all of you to have a go at answering. Now, obviously, we're in a very disruptive time, given COVID-19 and all of the challenges that have come with it, and more different industries have been impacted more than others, but we've all been impacted in some way, whether it's adapting to new ways of working or dealing with new challenges. And within the product space, it's all about solving problems and dealing with challenges. But I guess what I wanted to ask was, given the type of industry that you're in, the type of organization, the type of products that you kind of work through, what's been the biggest challenge that you've faced? And just as a bit of a kind of sub to that question, it might be a good idea just to give a quick intro into your organization first. Now, Tom, I'm going to kind of start with you if you kind of want to jump in and tackle that one.
Sure. You're just getting a question. Somebody saying they can't see us, Liam. I don't know whether there's a setting at your end.
Let's have a look.
But if not, I'm happy
to start talking. All the videos seem to be switched on. So okay. Kevin McCarthy can see us. Thank you, Kevin.
Bye.
Okay, fantastic. So, Tom, if you want to tackle that one first.
Sure, can. I'll be as brief as I can because I know I'm fascinated to hear all the other guys' responses here because we're all in such different markets. Jobadder's, our customer base is recruitment agencies and HR professionals in corporates. I think we split about 70-30, so 70% agencies, 30% corporates. So as you can imagine, the last a few months have been challenging, and Liam will know this too well. And in fact, all corporates as well have suffered from the fact that hiring has basically gone on hold whilst businesses work out how to manage themselves during this period. And with a business like ours, which is based off the classic SaaS model, which is monthly recurring revenue, we were obviously impacted. Revenues decreased, monthly drop-offs, and it's been a fascinating challenge. It's been tough, and seeing that significant shift in what our users' problem, what their need is day to day, has gone literally from one side where you've got a candidate poor market and a slightly job rich, it's been very good for recruiters the last few years, to a candidate rich market and a very job poor market, dramatically impacts what we have to think about in product and what needs we need to solve for our users. And it just means we're getting requirements, different needs come in all the time. We need to be much more agile and really, really listen to what they're after, to help them, pivot their business models away from maybe perm to contract or temp models, but also to how do they deal with video far more. If they're not face-to-face interviews, how do we do video? So how can we do that? So that's been a massive change for us, but I'll let the others jump in now.
I think for me, Tom, being a customer of Jobadder, it's been very evident to see how quickly you guys have responded to some of the challenges the recruitment industry have been going through. So, and it's been fantastic to see how much content that you guys have been pushing out that's really relevant to the industry. So that's been really good to see. So Adrienne, I'm going to ask you the same question and move on to you.
Sure. I am going to answer the questions in two parts. One, I'll take a community perspective, and then I'll talk about Brainmates. So let's start with the community. Absolutely, I've never seen a market where there are a flood of product management CVs around. And, you know, loads of people are coming to us asking for help, asking for support. And one of the things that they're saying is that they've never really had to interview for a job over the last 10 years. So now they've had to reconsider how they position themselves, how they write their CV, how they prepare for an interview. And so we've been, you know, trying to provide some support in the background to identify where their strengths are in their CVs and how they might position those for the jobs that are around. I mean, someone said that, you know, he went for a job at AWS, there were 1,000 applicants. I mean, how do you even look at 1,000 applicants? So it's challenging. And I guess that's not only challenging from the product manager point of view, but also from the recruitment point of view. How do you go through 1,000 CVs? Well, how do you find and identify, you know, the ones that might fit your business and help you solve your problem? So that's a real challenge. And so from a, I guess, learning training point of view, it's been a shift that people don't really need to really learn about product at the moment, but what they need support and help in is how to market themselves as a product, how to be, you know, the best fit for companies. So that's a challenge. From a Brainmates point of view, we're a face-to-face community-based business. So, you know, when you're not allowed to hang out with folks, it does take a massive hit to our business, which we have gone through. We're really lucky. We're very focused and clear about what we need to do over the next, you know, few months. We have a rolling strategy. Every 2 weeks we review it. We talk about it. We're, you know, communicate to our team on a daily basis through newsletters, too many meetings. So we're trying to cut those back, but I think you have to be very clear and succinct in your communications. And we've moved away from being a face-to-face training business, and we're offering, you know, remote real-time training. And we're lucky in the sense that the community trusts us. So we did have clients that say, you know, too bad we can't do it face to face. How about we go online? And so we've worked with them to take all our training online. But saying that though, the market has kind of shrunk considerably.
Yeah. And I agree with that. I think it's an interesting point that you make, Adrienne, and one that we spoke about recently. There are a lot of very talented, very experienced product professionals that have been stood down, that are out of work at the moment, and that's really, you know, concerning. But at the same time, you know, it's taking comfort in the fact that things will turn, and people will need to bring on product professionals again, and hopefully as quickly as things do turn. But it is a very challenging time because the product industry has been hit quite hard, for sure.
Absolutely.
So Scott, same question to you.
I echo a lot of this. I think COVID has really brought a massive trust issue out there, so we're a two-sided marketplace that is in the aged and disability care space. And so you know, if you look at some of the markets where COVID has really spread, something like 50% of the deaths from COVID have been in aged care. And so our client base is incredibly scared, and rightly so, I guess. And so I guess we kind of expected more of a pullback from the client side. I think the reality is a lot of that's it's not discretionary spending. It's government funded, the stuff that they need to get out of bed and just to live. So the reality is that that's probably less discretionary. And what we've seen unexpectedly a bigger pullback on the supply side of workers, because I guess there's more discretion there. They kind of took a pause, around start of March and said, okay, let's see what happens, and pulled back. And a lot of them are older, and this is a couple of hours a week, and they kind of put it on hold. And where they've actually been coming back more recently, but it was the first time in our business that we've ever had a supply side shortage. We've just never seen that before. We never anticipated it. And so that we really had to pivot so quickly to learn how to acquire workers. And we'd always been focused on worker quality and this kind of thing, but now it was actually, okay, like, what does a marketing campaign look like for workers? And then basically from scratch. So it was a real pivot for us, but a really good learning. I mean, we always knew we'd have to do it sometime, but we didn't realize it'd be so soon.
And I guess even bigger challenge for you, Scott, the partnership that you have with the Department of Health, where, if you want to explain a little bit kind of about that partnership, because it has meant that you've needed to try and get as many more support workers and healthcare workers on that one side of the marketplace.
Yeah, so we had, we've been incredibly fortunate, and our customers have been amazing through this whole process. But the government kind of came to us, the Department of Health came to us, and they, in anticipation, I guess generally the Australian government's been pretty proactive with this COVID, and they came to us and said, look, one of the challenges is once you get one case of COVID in an institution, you have to quarantine pretty much your entire staff overnight and replace, and the traditional sector doesn't have some of that flexibility. So they actually came to us proactively, which was a great recognition of Peter and Meredith and their PR work, and said, can you help us solve this problem with technology? And so we did, and basically we act as a bit of a clearinghouse for traditional providers, and they can share labor on the supply side when they need to. I guess it seemed perfect. We had a supply side challenge. We had the government coming saying, hey, can you help us with supply side? Like, we'll do a partnership around this. So it was perfect. But it's also a big product change, because we haven't traditionally partnered with traditional organizations. We've been a very B2C consumer-led business. And now it's suddenly like deal with the government department as well as traditional providers, build infrastructure to give them visibility and transparency into what's going on. Like, it's a whole new customer we've just never really dealt with before. Real challenge from a product perspective.
And Christy, then over to you. And I'm assuming, given the fact that you work specifically with young people, to supplying information and providing information to young people with mental health issues and things like that, COVID-19 is an anxiety-ridden time. So has there been a big shift around the problem for you and the information that you've needed to provide and things like that?
It's an interesting question, actually, because I'm hearing that everyone else on the panels had these kind of fairly big pivots, but I would actually say that as ReachOut offers, the service that we offer is providing information and community services to young people who are experiencing a level of distress or have concerns about trying to understand what's happening with their mental health. I'd say that we haven't had an existential product crisis. Like, if anything, that's just resolved our conviction that the product's really important and the experience is really important. What we have seen is an increase in demand. To put it, how do you put it? If you look at the stats, yes, there's been an increase in demand. And being digital people, we can go straight to the stats and go, well, what's happening? Where's it coming from? So there's been an increase in demand for young people, but also, interestingly, we have two other markets that we address. One is the parents and carers of young people. And parents are particularly challenged at the moment because they're sitting at home, often with teenagers who are trying to study, also in the same home. And parents are struggling with that idea that they're not also a teacher as well as a parent and doing full-time work from home. So that there's pressure on them. And then the third kind of ripple in that pond is going out to schools, where there's been, again, increased demand from schools, from teachers wanting to access resources to help keep students comfortable with the change in online learning and manage their stress levels. So yeah, look, our main challenge has been what more can we do and how quickly can we do it? So I'd say it's less of a pivot and more of an adaptation of maybe we should drop some less important things we're doing and make room for some things that we've long known are part of the strategy, but it's just about clearing the space and going, now is a really good time to accelerate these strategies.
It seems like it's a common theme that there's a bit of a shift to more kind of the short-term solutions and that have kind of steered away from the kind of longer-term roadmaps and things like that, which we will get into in a second. But just kind of I'll stay with you, Christy, on the next question, because we spoke about this recently, and everyone that's involved on this call, everybody that's agreed to give up their time, you all manage teams of people, teams of product professionals or people within technology, and I guess working from home has very quickly become the new norm. And facilitating all conversations over technology like Zoom. I've read an article about Zoom fatigue yesterday because I think that there's just so many meetings on a day-to-day basis that people are having, and it's exhausting in itself. But it's become essential for people to continue running their businesses. More so in the product space, I think, where cross-functional collaboration is essential for delivery. How quickly, I guess the question is, how quickly have you been able to adapt and change to this new way of working and pulling the troops together to ensure that the ball isn't dropped, you know?
Oh, how quickly? The answer was when we thought that the full-time working from home was coming, we as a team agreed to do a practice run. We took a Monday and said, right, everyone has to work from home from Monday. Come back on Tuesday and tell us what you learned about that experience. And what we discovered was we had different levels of access to VPNs and test environments. And so pragmatically, we were able to identify issues pretty early, address them with, in our kind of infrastructure networks. So by the time it was like full-time, no one's going back in the office, we're pretty well set up. One thing we did notice, though, as being the digital team, we were the ones on Slack and on chat messaging, and we had collaborative programs, and the rest of the organisation was still on email. That lasted about 3 days before the digital team said, hi, I think we could get you all onto Slack. And look, there are pros and cons to all of this, but one of the benefits of that is it's cut down the enormous volume of email coming out of the organisation. So I think it's accelerated. If there was a benefit to have come out of this, it's accelerated the fact that the rest of the organisation has been dragged slightly into the future at the behest of the digital teams.
And Tom, is there anything that you'd add there? Has it been an easy transition for you and your team over at Jobadder?
It's interesting. We just did a survey yesterday, and the boss was asking, the pros and cons of working remotely, and the majority of us have all said communication has increased and got better, which is quite interesting, because if you asked any of us in product before, I think being in the office, being face to face with developers or your designers, being there, being more present was seemingly a better way to communicate, because you pick up on a lot of empathetic cues and visual cues. We found that I certainly, yes, there's Zoom fatigue, but the communication between my team and the dev team and the rest of the team around the business have dramatically improved. And we actually, with Slack, the world of Slack, we introduced it about 3 years ago to the business, and then it was got rid of from the business because the boss decided, understandably, that there was a bit too much chatter. It didn't seem like the most efficient introduction to the business. So what we did when we reintroduced it recently was to put a few more rules around channels and some of those the Slack best practice. And it's been phenomenal. And it works so well. And we've got teams all around the world. We're a very remote workforce. 30-40% prior to this were remote anyway. So we were lucky, different to Christy, in the sense that we were 100% SaaS across the whole company in terms of the tools we used. So it did allow us to be pretty quick to respond to this situation. The hard bit has been, well, how do we maintain that day-to-day communication? How does a product team work with the devs? How do we work with a designer in an interactive fashion? So tools like Miro, tools like Envision, really upskilling the teams on getting the most out of those SaaS solutions to help teams collaborate and communicate better has been critical in this period.
Scott, would you agree with that? Has it kind of pulled teams closer together and has kind of increased communication, made it better and more essential?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, at the start, we were doing like a daily update and daily stand-ups to stay in sync. And I think that's now kind of broken out into the individual squads have got their stand-ups and and we do a weekly kind of stand up on a Monday morning. But yeah, definitely puts more discipline around communication. I think there's less, I used to get a lot of complaints around shoulder taps and random meetings and pulling people into things, and maybe a function of being a startup as well, and kind of graduating out of that phase. And I think it probably forced us to scale up a little bit more in terms of communication organization, but
yeah,
probably not quite at Tom's level. I think where we've got a gap at the moment is when we have a big project that needs like 5 people to brainstorm something, then I think we struggle a little bit more, probably a little. We need one of those collaboration kind of tools just to whiteboard something effectively in digital format.
Yeah. Are there any, Adrienne, I'll kind of move the same question on to you, but I'm also then interested to know, are there any kind of tools that people are using that have been useful to kind of navigate through this new way of working? Because I mean, Christy, we spoke about this, you know, within the product space, you like to kind of use a lot of Post-its and kind of collaborate from a physical sense. So you've had to adapt and change quite a lot to be able to kind of use new technologies and systems to allow that to happen. So Adrienne, over to you.
Gosh, well, I miss the fact that I normally turn around and tap someone on the shoulder and say, "Hey, can we do this? Can we do that?" So that means that every time we want to do something, it takes a lot longer to gather the troops to decide on what to do. But saying that, the quality of the decision making, I think, has become better. And the fact that we can capture the information, the decisions that we've made and store it somewhere has improved significantly. So previously it was like, you know, we're a small team, chat, let's go off, let's do it. Now let's meet, which is longer and more painful sometimes, as much as I love them. But it's okay, well, we can brainstorm using Miro, we can capture all that information and we can pop it onto Confluence. So that means that decision that's been made in a distributed way is captured more centrally and accessible to others as well. So that's been great. But we have extra challenges because we work with lots of different clients around Australia and outside of Australia. So we've got multiple laptops. We're on multiple Slack channels, multiple Confluence pages, so many different systems. So for us, the problem is trying to manage all the different forms of communications across our customer network, which is a bit tricky. But, you know, I think a month ago when we started training online, we needed to teach people how to use the system. So things like Miro, Mural, even Zoom, and breaking out into different groups was, you know, in demand. People like, well, how do I get on there? What do I need to do before starting the training and before starting the learning? But in 30 days, when we run our class last week, people are like, yep, I got it. Yep, I know how to move around. I know exactly what to do. I'm very familiar with it. So you've seen this kind of steep learning curve on how people kind of navigate systems. They've had no choice but to learn how to use the systems. So in that way, we're good at moving fast. You know, previous excuses about not moving and taking our sweet time. Look at the government. How fast have they been making apps? And it was 2-year projects, but now it's like 30 days we can, which is good.
Yeah. And do you, so I guess now that we have pivoted to this new way of working and product teams have pivoted, do you feel like this is going to change the way that product teams and cross-functional collaboration work together moving forward? Do you think there's going to be a lot more of this style of interaction versus standing in a physical room and sharing ideas?
Well, I mean, I still think there's a lot of value standing in a physical room. You know, you do miss a lot of the social cues, but instead, potentially, I mean, we would put out lots of Post-it notes and brainstorm amongst ourselves, but instead of wasting the paper now, I think we'll probably be in the same room on a Miro board and workshopping using software in the same room, which would be what I'd like to do.
Yeah.
I think the tools are here to stay. They're only going to get better.
Scott, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree. I think what it's forced us to do is be a little bit more deliberate around what we're having meetings for. And it's not because I feel uncomfortable, let's just talk about it. It's more like, okay, we've got a decision to make and let's specifically brainstorm that and focus on that. And so, yeah, I think that behavior hopefully will change going forward and we can be more deliberate. Yeah.
I think for me, it raises an interesting question. Different organisations have a different comfort level around working from home. Like, if I can't see you actively working in the office, are you actually working? Whereas that, we've just had to remove that and go, we have to have a lot more trust in our teams. We have other mechanisms to check in on them and support them. But that question now of, I can't run a workshop till 100% of you can be available on a Tuesday, 7 days from now in the office doing this, it's kind of gone. It's, we can do this now remotely with some of you in the office and some of you remotely. If you use things like tools like Miro, as Adrienne says. And it seems like that's a favourite of all of ours. I hadn't used it till recently, and suddenly there's no whiteboard, there's no sticky notes. And I'm like, I looked at a bunch of options and I just went, for speed and ease, we really need something that's incredibly intuitive. And that thought that these tools are going to get better, I go, wow, for someone whose first time using it was only when this started, I found my ability to get into those tools incredibly seamless. So if anyone's looking for ways of solving these kind of collaboration problems, I highly recommend you check some of them out. They're amazing.
If anyone listening on the call as well has any ideas on different things that they're using, different technologies that are really helping them, then feel free to share those. And just very quickly before I launch into the next question, I'm gonna take the opportunity towards the end to ask some questions for everybody listening. So please feel free to jot down a question and I'll try and get to those towards the end, obviously time permitting. So I guess the next question is around the team still. And Adrienne, we spoke about it. I talked about team motivation, but you said actually, maybe it's more around team fatigue, which I do completely understand. And I think there could be a preconception that people working from home, you have more time on your hands and things like that. But within the product space, it's the opposite. I mean, the problem has magnified and people are working around the clock to try and make things happen. So, people are working a lot harder in that space. So, I mean, it's a difficult question to answer, but is there anything that you've done with your teams or anything that you could do to kind of prevent that aspect of team fatigue and being overworked and having that kind of that sense of burnout? Tom, I'll throw that over to you first of all.
Sure. I think you just got to be, I think the leadership team and management team have to be very honest and transparent about the situation, first and foremost. And to prevent fatigue, you've just got to be very on the front foot to say, guys, everyone's working, everyone's so much more focused. I think we've all found that because you've got no one tapping you on your shoulder, as Adrienne says. You haven't got a potential distraction of someone walking in a door and talking and I don't know, a fellow sales or a salesperson coming from another department coming over and asking me questions. I love my sales team, really. But I think you have to make sure that the team members know to take breaks and they're allowed to take breaks, and they shouldn't worry about stepping away from the tools or the green dot on Slack that says you're active or not active. You've got to let people know that there's trust now. We want to make sure that we can all feel that we trust each other to get work done. I think we're all seeing the impacts of that. But really, from my point of view, it's being empathetic as leaders to your team. We should be empathetic as product managers. We want to make sure that we're being overly empathetic. We're really feeling what they're going through, because everyone's situation is very different depending on where they're working from. Are they on their own, with children, with a partner? I mean, Lunia and I here, we have to balance our calendars because we both seem to be on meetings all day, every day. And it's now getting to a point where we've got to find the solution to sync up our calendars so that if I'm on Zoom. So there are different types of stress. So we just have to be very, very aware of what our team members are going through. And I think that's what I'm trying to do as a leader in my team, and make sure that I listen and ask, are you okay, at the beginning of any meeting I have with everybody? Because we just have to be very aware of the mental health issues that come with all of this. That'll be my point.
I think empathy is very key when it comes to working with teams that are kind of adapting and going through some pain at the moment as well. I mean, a lot of people have been stood down from roles. People that haven't been stood down within those organizations are going to be feeling that too. So empathy is really key. I've just been asked if I can change the view. I'm going to click a button here. I'm not sure what it's going to do. If somebody can comment, does that show everybody at the same time? I think it does. Yeah, perfect. Great. So I think you could only see people that were talking. So
yeah, happy chat channel.
There have been a couple of suggestions as well. Loom for training is a system. The Tandem app has been a godsend for us. Live briefs and demos. So there have been a few suggestions there. Adrienne, I'm going to move the same question on to you around kind of team fatigue, because it is something that we did speak about. So
yes. If I'm feeling it, then everybody must be feeling it. And I'm pretty open to like, I'm really feeling it. I guess it all starts with me. I'm pretty open. I'm a big believer in, Ray Dalio's work, being upfront, honest. We live by a set of principles. So if it starts with me, then everybody feels comfortable to be able to share how they're feeling. And most of my team, essentially run their own day. They just tell us when they're on, when they're off. Nobody has any issues with that. We used to run our stand-ups on on Slack. Now it's moved to Trello and Confluence. It's a myriad of ways we're testing. But I think it always starts with you as a leader. Whatever you do and whatever you model, people will follow. And because we're pretty open. The other point is, how people need to understand the health of your business so they can feel secure in the job. So we put out, our cash projections. All of it is modeled, it's available. Like I say, we write every day and we show people what's going on. And I treat everyone's like an adult, and I expect the same. So model the behavior.
Mm-hmm. I think, transparency is so important in these situations.
Yep.
So the team can understand exactly what is happening. So
yep.
I think that's
there are no surprises.
No.
There are absolutely no surprises. In fact, sometimes I think people would like to have surprises because I think I talk too much. I have to wind it back.
You never.
And less meetings. I think we've cut back on meetings. There's just too many. People just need to be able to do the work.
Yeah. Christy, is there anything that you kind of add there?
Yeah, look, there's two things I want to say. Just yesterday we had a team retrospective at the end of the sprint. We all got together and decided to include an item in the discussion, which was, let's give 5 minutes to calling out ways that we're looking after ourselves, like things like how are we connecting, are we being active, are we giving, are we learning? And it was actually really nice to hear from everyone just what they've been doing, like from playing basketball more to I built a little community library and put it up on my front fence.
Mm-hmm.
It just humanised the conversation back away from work into, us as human beings. Yeah. That was really lovely. And it was just 5 minutes. One other thing I really want to call out, because I've had this conversation with someone on my team. If you're a bit of an introvert, and particularly, I think this particularly applies to some of the women I know, there's a sense of relief actually in not having to get fully dressed and made up for an office every day. And that's been in some ways that helps some of us look after ourselves and go, it's just less time I'm giving away to something I don't particularly value. And I don't know how other people relate to that, and maybe, Tom, Scott and Liam, you're going, I literally don't know what you're talking about, but it pops up in some team conversations, like how do we feel as humans not being in an office? And for some people it's actually great relief and a giving back of time.
And Scott, I'll throw that over to you just to add anything there.
Look, I'm an introvert and I'm loving it. It's a massive energy change for me, and I'm a bit embarrassed to admit that, to be honest. Like I don't know, I could walk into my management meeting and say, actually, I'm kind of enjoying being remote, because I don't think that would go down well. There are definitely people on that team who are more extroverted and who are clearly looking forward to going back, right? You can see they dial in a little bit stunned and kind of desperate for conversation. So it's a really interesting time. I think the empathy part is the key, and we're doing more all hands. And I think there was a period like Thursday last week, we did an all hands just because I got the sense that a lot of people were really burned out, and basically saying, okay, if you need to take Friday off and, recharge, that's okay. And just giving people a bit more flexibility, but just talking to them about it and making sure that they know they've got permission to do it. Yeah. I think the second point there I would say is, I think people have touched on this, but just giving certainty as well, just saying, whether it's the sharing of the projections, or in our case, I think it was a little bit just explicitly recognizing this COVID thing is going to be a bit of a marathon rather than a sprint, and let's go back to roadmap planning and our squad cross-functional, and it's not just a a hackathon for 6 months. Like we actually do need to plan for this properly and plan.
I think I'll stay with you on the next question, Scott, because it is something that we discussed around, there is, and I guess it varies from industry to industry about how quickly people have had to adapt to COVID-19 and focus on a lot of the short-term stuff, short-term roadmaps that you've had to pivot during these times. But how important is it to keep the focus on the long-term roadmap, and keep that alignment to ensure that when things do change, it's not going to be a scramble to try and get things moving again?
Yeah, definitely. Very important. I've got a really poor metaphor that maybe I can use. I think there was a meme that went around that was like, the cost of toilet paper roll is higher than a barrel of oil at the moment. And I mean, it's just the chaos that's going on. And I think it's in that metaphor, like they're both priorities, right? We need toilet paper and we need oil, and now they're equal. Which one should you prioritize? And I think it's just stepping back and saying, look, let's ignore the spikes. This is clearly a spike, and toilet paper will get better, and we don't need to stockpile, and it's fine, right? We'll get over it. Versus something like the trend of oil is actually something we've been thinking about for a long period of time. And this might have step changed the move in that direction, or it reinforces an existing strategy we have. So let's not throw that plan away. Let's look at it, maybe advance it by a year or something, just to kind of pick that up. And I think for the health industry in particular, like, it's been very interesting to see how regulation has managed to change so quickly. Things like bulk billing, telehealth GP consultations has been talked about for 5 years, and then in 2 weeks they can somehow allow it. Just being really looking at this stuff that's changed and has advanced some strategic priorities that maybe you'd put as secondary, and bringing some of those up. But I think just keeping a little bit of certainty and still being strategic is really important.
Tom, I'm going to ask the same question to you, because obviously the recruitment industry has been hit pretty hard given recent events, and like I mentioned before, seeing a lot of the work that Jobadder are doing to try and protect their customers and provide that information. It seems like there's been a lot of work that you've needed to do and your teams have needed to do to ensure that you're kind of doing that. So I'll ask the same question to you about focus on long term over short term.
Yeah, the long term is extremely important. I mean, whenever in product we're always telling the story of the journey we're kind of on. Like, everybody who's in, like, our developers always want to know why we're doing the things we're doing and where we're going next and what's after that. And if we lose focus on that longer term objective, like we're kind of, another sort of weird analogy, but if you're running we might be running on a different lane in the running track at the moment, but we're on the same running track heading forward. We kind of need to stay aware of that. We may need to shift, to the inside track very quickly in the short term, such as we are focusing on a few other video initiatives and initiatives that help people focus on business development in our world. But the long-term goal we need to maintain. We know that the market right now is shifting from a permanent workforce to a more contract temp workforce. So we had a great webinar recently to try and educate and say, hey, how can we help our customers pivot from permanent to temp? And that's more just an educational piece, and that's how can we help, and is there anyone in our business that can help them do that? But we know that as a strategy we want to help that space get better. How can we as a software business provide efficiencies in high volume hiring versus permanent recruitment strategies? But that's a strategy we want to head down. It's about improving the recruitment experience online, more time face-to-face, kind of less time. I always say more time face-to-face, less time interface. Because we're working in a human industry, and we have to stick to that whilst we're getting hit in the short term with all these ideas, and we need to just do this and this. Yes, we do need to do certain things, and if we are a clever, agile team, you can ship out some short-term wins out. That can help support the long-term strategy, but you do need to stay strong on that, because otherwise, I think you run risk of disillusionment within the team, etc.
Yeah. I mean, I guess there needs to be a time where you start focusing on the recovery. Adrienne, is there anything that you would add to that?
I think that it's important not to stop producing or developing, because if you do, then the engine runs cold And when things start to heat up and cars start to move around, I'm using the oil analogy, then to start up your engine again, it's going to take you an enormous amount of time, and you're going to have a lot more time required to catch up to somebody who's already running that race. So if you think of your roadmap as a number of problems to be solved, you want to be solving your most pressing immediate problems. You want to evaluate your future problems to figure out, well, are those problems still valid or not? Do people want oil or toilet paper? Do people want to move, transport, or do people want to clean themselves? Those are, you've got to look at your problems, and this is where product management needs to probably be broader. Potentially, we've been focused so much on the minutiae, the functions, the features. We need to step up several rungs up the ladder, and we need to now be super mindful of what's happening, not only in Australia, but in the world economy. We are so super connected. When one part falls, it has ripple effects all around the world. You think an insurer, for example, wouldn't have any problems, would be able to maintain their business. But in actual fact, when me, lonely old little consumer here who stops buying certain things, well, then I have no need to insure my new car, for example, because I don't have a new car. And so if you think of us as a system that's so, intrinsically linked, you're going to have to start to work out the pieces of the puzzle. You can't just focus on your little product and your little problems that you're trying to solve. You've got to understand how that is impacted by the way that the global economy moves. It's massive. Supply chain, super important. We need to be so clever about that. We can't just have one supplier. And we can't not be part of, as product people, we can't not be a part of those conversations. We have to be very much involved with that. If we have a tech supplier that's in the Ukraine, well, we need to understand, well, how good are they? What happens if something goes wrong? What happens if they're all ill? You can't stop your engine. You got to figure that out. And I think that it's time that product people step up, move up the ladder, and have these conversations. Now.
Christy, is there anything that you'd add to that? We've got lots of comments which I will read in a second before I launch into the next question. I'm also conscious that we're getting through time pretty quickly. So Christy, anything that you'd add there?
Yeah, I'm fairly new in my job, and I've joined after 15 years in a commercial organisation. I've joined a non-profit organisation, so I'm still finding the language and the sector I work in quite new. But one thing I would say, from what I've understood of where we're at right now, is that there is a strategy that's been brewing that's it's not a competitive strategy. We're a non-profit. We're not looking to win the market or take market share or anything. But it's about providing the best service we can for people who are really in need of it. And in the mental health sector, there's a number of organisations that actually offer that service. There's been this kind of brewing strategy to create better partnerships. So instead of looking at our competitors, it's looking at partnerships and making that stronger. And I think if COVID-19's done anything, it's really accelerated the understanding of just how important that is, that the future world, we're not serving our customers well. If they come to us, they find some information and they realise they need to go somewhere else in the mental health sector, but we've offered no pathway for them to get there. We've just dropped them at the edge of the website for the community and said, sorry, that's the end of what we do. So it's about, for us, the strategy is about making smart pathways across the partnerships and really solving that user journey in amongst all of us. And I think government as well, as much as they've wanted in the past, they're now able to really push for that as well. We'd like to see the mental health sector organise itself better to offer this. And so I think that's where we're at, is it's strengthened our resolve around, yes, the strategy, right, we've just got to accelerate it.
Thank you for that, Christy. I'm just going to read some of the comments that a few people have made, and I think it's more kind of suggestions around team and fatigue and things like that. Kevin said that we have a once a week coffee stand-up. Work isn't talked about. We just talk about what each of us are up to, using the opportunity to unwind in the leisure time. Great suggestion there. So Nima mentioned that we also do a Friday afternoon wine down with wine on Zoom. I think there's a lot of wine meetings at the end of the week where we chat about our week outside of work. So it doesn't all have to be work related. It's a great suggestion there. Christy, I'm going to stick with you on the next question because it's kind of focusing around customer, and it's actually a question that's asked in the Q&A, and I'm going to move on to Q&A after this as well. But looking at your customer groups, is now the time to be talking to your customers more than ever?
Absolutely more than ever. Maybe if you're in a different industry, this isn't so applicable, but ReachOut is incredibly lucky to have a research team, and they've been out there talking to customers, young people and their parents primarily, to gauge how their needs are changing and therefore what we're going to need to adapt. What kind of content do we need to produce? What resources, what videos, how can we help? So I feel incredibly lucky to work for an organisation that has a research arm to go and really dig deep on that. There's also research you can do, of course, through your analytics, but I think it's important to get the qualitative insights at the moment.
Scott, do you agree that now is the time to be focusing on more qualitative research and trying to talk to the customer and engage with them more?
Yeah, absolutely. Like our marketing team keep coming back and saying, oh, have we spammed our customer base too much yet? Like, is it really? But I think it's resonated really well, and it's interesting. We rolled out a video chat feature, for example, to help people make connections on the platform, and just talking about that. Like, the adoption was good, but not like crazy high. But the amount of traction it got in the community in terms of, oh, thank you for giving me this kind of safety net, and it's great to see you being proactive, and I feel safer with your platform, and like you guys are listening, has been really important, and really great to hear that feedback. So yeah, just showing that you're responding and you're listening, I think is very critical at the moment. Everyone's just looking for trust signals everywhere. So the more you can give, the better, I think, at the moment.
Yeah. There's a question that we have here, how to set the products to genuinely help the consumers. It's quite relevant to what we're talking about now. So Adrienne, I might kind of throw that question over to you if you're willing to tackle that one.
I think it speaks to what everybody on this call is doing, which is really understanding your customers' problems. And that's not just listening to what they want. It's actually really understanding what they have difficulties doing. So there's a subtle difference there. It's not about what they're looking for, what they want, or what they might say, but what is the problem they're having, achieving a goal, completing a task, what's preventing them from doing all of that. And it's a very good kind of product researcher, a UX researcher, to observe, watch, listen, and not directly copy what people say, what customers are saying, but really delving deeper into that and kind of understanding the nuances of what they're experiencing, to be able to pinpoint the problem. And once you do that, the world's your oyster. I know we talk about it all the time. I know I'm like a little bleeping little sheep talking about customer problems, and it does get annoying, but that is the essentially cornerstone of good product management, and it is now imperative that we practice that. Now, I say that not from a person of not from a trainer's point of view. I've got to, right? I teach people how to do this stuff, and I also have a burning platform that's about to, combust, which is our business. And if I look at what we're doing in our business, we're not simply jumping off and making new products. We can. Tomorrow we can launch a new product. We can call it membership. We can call it this. But we're not doing that. We're going back to the core problem of what our customers are experiencing. We're using our Miro boards and trying to work through all of that. And we're going out to do research. Now, we're taking our time, because if we get that right, then everything else will be much better, even though we've got a burning platform that says that if you don't make money, you're in dire trouble. But now is the best time to do good product work.
Moving to the next question, because there are a few there. Oh, no, that's absolutely fine. Scott, I'm probably going to throw this one to you, because it seems to be kind of healthcare and health tech related, but keeping in mind the various products in the markets, going forward, is there going to be a focus on developing products that align with COVID and that addresses being responsive to the same? in your
Definitely
opinion?
definitely being responsive. I think everyone's looking at their business and thinking, how could we have reacted faster and what can we change to make that better next time? I mean, the reality is most businesses probably had 2 or 3 weeks to respond to this. And so, you do have to plan for that responsiveness next time, much more than I think we did before. So for us, being a marketplace, getting that liquidity rebalancing happening really quickly is the key part. And so that's things like, for example, ability for people to edit their profile, add new skill sets, this type of stuff. And we should make those functions easier. Previously, we'd assume some level of, staticness to that, but, maybe they'll get a new certification once a year kind of thing. But the reality is, like, people are need to be more responsive. Everyone's going in and updating their profiles at the moment. Like, it's the most common task we're getting from people. So, like, okay, if these are up to date, we'll get a much more responsive workforce and platform as a whole. So I think to Adrienne's point, we're working on really validated customer problems. They're just ones we wouldn't have prioritized without COVID. And so we're digging back through all those validated problem sets we deprioritized and saying, actually, should we be bringing these back up again?
Yeah. Tom, I'm going to ask you the next question. Given the crisis, is it fair to state that some aspects of hypothesis validation for product features is out of the window? And now is it just focused on build, deliver, and test it in the market faster?
Look, I don't know whether you would throw out hypothesis validation. I think there's an emphasis on speed, yes, but there's doing product correctly still. You're going to get, and this I sort of touched on it earlier, you're going to get people asking for this, and that, but you do need to stick to, am I solving a problem that is actually there? And I'm not just throwing a magical tool that doesn't actually, it sort of sounds great, but doesn't actually get used. I think you have to try and adhere to your best product excellence framework if you possibly can during this period. Yes, speed it up. Yes, be more, maybe chunk it up. Don't go quite as deep into the detail in some aspects. I do like shipping and iterating. That is a core part of what we do in product. You'll get the best usage reporting and the best data from people actually using it in their job rather than using a prototype when you're trying to get them to think about how they may use it in their job. I fully agree with that, but I don't think you need to get rid of any. You can still do hypothesis. You can hypothesize how this should work and how you want to success measure it. So I still try to stick to it. I would recommend that, but try to add some speed where you can into that process. It is hard, I know, and building product is tricky. We know that. Everyone listening here should know that. But maybe there's a bit in there is about ship, iterate, yeah. But stick to product excellence if you can.
Christy, I'm going to ask you the next question. I think we'll probably have time for one, possibly two more, just before we wrap up. But have you found that you've had to communicate with people outside of your product squads or circle in a different way to convey your product initiatives during this time?
Oh, I'm so new in the job. I still have phone calls where I'm still picking up the phone once a week to someone I've never ever spoken to in the organisation. So I might not be best placed to answer this because for me, I'm always stepping outside of the squad.
Okay. Does anyone else want to kind of tackle that one, Adrienne?
Are you sure? No, come on, Tom, please.
Go for it.
Because I can answer it and it would be a long-winded answer, but go for it, guys.
Tom, do you want to give that one a quick go?
Sorry, just give me the question again.
Yeah, sorry. So it was, have you found that you've had to communicate with people outside of your product squad or circle in a different way to convey your product initiatives during this time?
There's definitely been, yes, again, it comes back to adhering to your strategic mission. People still ask me, where's that big integration we're doing? We are still looking at those, but we have to be smarter around, we're trying to solve and get through this period. Everyone's in it. We're all in it together. We should be communicating and we should be focusing on initiatives across the company that improve our customer experience as a whole. And that is, as we're doing at Jobadder, webinars. We're trying to increase education. Why don't we tell our customers it's a great time to look at how you've got your system set up How can you really refine? How do we help them see some of the functionality we've released over the last 6 months, 12 months, and really get the value that we in product may not have marketed as good as we should have? And how do we tell them the stories better? So there are company-wide initiatives to help focus things, whilst also we have to stick to how we communicate best in product to the business going forward anyway. We shouldn't really divert, we shouldn't go away from that thinking.
Yeah. Guys, unfortunately, we don't have any more time to ask any questions from the participants, but I'm sure all of our panelists would be more than open to answer any questions if you want to kind of connect with them on LinkedIn. If there's anything specific that you want to direct at anyone on this call, then I'm sure they wouldn't mind you doing that. But I guess just to kind of wrap things up, what would be quite good for people on the call is to have a bit of a kind of a takeaway, maybe a kind of like a key learning. So what's been the biggest learning kind of takeaway that you've had over the past few weeks? And I guess just to add to that, is there anything that you would do differently, if you were in this situation again? And we'll start with you, Tom.
I think it's improved communication. My biggest takeaway is actually asking people, are they okay? Like, we should do that in day-to-day life anyway, without COVID coming along and doing that. It's about being, as a leader, understanding the pressures and strains the team are going through. I would like to have done that more over the past few weeks. I probably should have been a bit more aware of that, but I think it's really coming into the teams, and we're all fighting for each other. What I would say is just keep talking to our customers. This is a big thing we talk about in product all the time, but right now everyone's feeling it, especially in the industry Liam and I are in. We're all touched by the hiring, the job space. Everyone's feeling that, and everyone's under pressure. So the more we can empathize and talk and understand what they're going through, the better. So continuous communication inward within your team and external.
Scott?
Yeah, I think biggest learning for me, actually, my mission, I guess, is to make Mabel a product-led company, and I always believed in technology to make us product-led, but I didn't really tie it. I don't think there was a wide recognition of the business. I think the pace which we had to transform could only be done with technology. Like, we literally couldn't call our customers. We've kind of reached that size where it's just not possible anymore, at least within a reasonable time frame. So, like, it's reinforced that product-led is important. And I think probably tied to that is my biggest, not hindsight regret, I don't know, but observation is that I probably could have built the product team a bit bigger or invested a little bit more. I kind of, if I really did believe in product led, I probably should have leaned on the product team a little bit more and pushed them a little harder. Now, because now they're at the forefront and now they're stressed. So,
Christy, over to you.
Yeah, for me, the biggest learning is just how, as individuals, how adaptable everyone has been to the change in working from home and some of the pressures. I mean, I've got a product manager on my team who hasn't done an awful lot of reporting in his recent history, and he was kind of onto the COVID response team and asked to help them understand reporting, what's happening in the data. And it's been a really good growth opportunity for some people, but also quite stressful as well. But, I see that we're adaptable. So if we were to have another crisis like this, what would I take away from it is I'd really like to go into the next one, because there was bushfires, there was drought, then there was bushfires, and now there's COVID-19. There will be another one. I'd like to go into it without some of our legacy systems, the tech debt that we build up that makes it quite slow to change some things, because you realise how quickly you need to adapt some product things. And instead of just doing the most we can, being super creative within some of the tool sets we have, I'd like to have things that are quicker to develop upon. Maybe that's just us. I'm pretty sure every business has technical skeletons in the closet, though.
I'm a bit nervous because this is my first Zoom webinar. I don't know if we're just going to cut off at 1 o'clock, but I guess we'll keep rolling, because I want to throw that question to you as well, Adrienne. So, but if just in case we do cut off, I just want to thank you all for joining. There will be a recording of this as well. So everybody that's RSVP'd or registered will get a recording of this as well. But we'll finish with you then, Adrienne.
Oh gosh, okay. One thing I'm going to do in the future, I think I'm going to war game the shit out of everything. Anybody that comes to me with their product, even our products, I'm going to go, right, let me prepare, let me think through this, because all sorts of things will happen, and this has taught us a good lesson not to be complacent. You know, we look back and I think we have over 30 years of good economic growth, and now we're going through our first dip in a very long time, and we've been complacent. So I think for product people, it's wargaming, people.
Well, we haven't switched off, so that's a good sign. You could have carried on for a bit longer there. But I mean, the key things that I've taken from some of the stuff that you said that are so important to it's the aspect of talking, you know, improving communication, empathy, you know, all of those kind of things are so important at times like this. And I just want to thank you all for taking the time out to contribute in this discussion. I know the majority of the people that are on the call are either kind of product managers and product owners. Some people would have been stood down. Some people will still be working, but working harder than ever. So to taking the time out to share some insights, it's just fantastic. So really, really appreciate that. Thank you everybody for listening as well, and you will get a copy of the recording. I'll aim to have that sent out on Monday or Tuesday. And guys, thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Take care, guys.
Bye.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Tom.
Bye.
Bye.
See you guys.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.